If your bike's battery died, you replaced it with a new one, and then that battery died too, you might be cursed, or there could be something wrong with your bike's charging system. I don't know anything about lifting hexes, but I can show you how to test your bike's stator and regulator rectifier. Let's open up the shop manual. This episode is powered by Duraboost batteries. Get 10% off your order at RevZilla.com with discount code TSM102023. Your motorcycle's charging system really just consists of two assemblies. There's the stator and rotor at the end of the crankshaft that collaborate to produce alternating current, and then there's the regulator rectifier, which keeps the stator's AC voltage in check and then converts it to DC so your battery stays charged and healthy. These parts may look complicated and perhaps even a little bit sinister, but testing them is pretty straightforward, and you don't even have to remove the components from the bike. You just need access to the stator wires, the resistance specs for your bike's stator, and a decent multimeter. To test the stator, we have to find its wiring. So go to the ignition side of your engine and look for the wiring harness coming out from behind the stator cover. Then trace that back into the bike until you find the connector. The majority of street bikes have a stator with 3 windings or coils, so the connector is going to have 3 wires that are going to be the same color. They're usually yellow, but they might also be white, or in this case, they are black. And once you've located the appropriate connector, you want to unplug it and then set your multimeter to ohms because we're going to measure the resistance of the individual coils. Now, as I said, most stators have 3 windings or coils, and we need to check the resistance between each of the 3 windings. That means connecting wire 1 to wire 2, wire 1 to wire 3, and finally wire 2 to wire 3. Take your probes and carefully insert them in the connector to test each of the windings and take note of the reading. The specification for this Royal Enfield is 0.4 to 0.6 ohms, and we're getting 0.4 and 0.5 on all of the coils. So that means this stator checks out. If you got a reading outside of your bike specifications, either higher or lower, or if the meter reads OF or OL, that's either overflow or open line, that suggests you've got a break in the stator windings, at which point you need a new stator. Another reason your stator might be bad is if the insulation has broken down, allowing a short to ground. To test for that, you take one probe and you can either put it on the battery negative terminal or any unpainted part of the chassis so that it is grounded, and then take your other probe and test on each of the terminals for the stator. Your meter should read OL, or in the case of mine, OF, indicating that there is no continuity between the stator and ground. If you get a resistance reading of any amount, that means there's a short, and once again, you are in the market for a new stator. And when you do go to replace the stator, it's probably gonna look something like this. You can see the crispy discoloration where the wires overheated and cooked the insulation. That is what we call a burned out stator. Different makes and model motorcycles will have different resistance ranges for the stator windings. So if your bike has something really small and specific, say 0.22 to 0.32 ohms, like some Yamahas, know that unless you've spent $400 on professional testing equipment, your multimeter probably isn't going to yield accurate results. I know mine wouldn't. In that case, you could do what's called a dynamic stator test. With the bike running and your multimeter set to AC, we're going to probe the stator plug just like we did for the resistance test. You should see about 25 volts on each leg at idle, and that ought to rise to 60 to 70 volts by 4,000 or 5,000 RPM. Keep in mind that during the dynamic test, the stator is not supplying any electricity to the bike, so you need to make sure your battery is fully charged and healthy so that the motorcycle runs properly. If the stator checks out, but you're still having issues with the battery under or overcharging, then the regulator rectifier might be the problem. This thing serves 2 purposes, as the name suggests. It's got diodes in it that only allow voltage to flow in one direction, so it rectifies the AC coming off the stator to DC, and it also has regulator circuitry that throttles the 70 plus volts we saw coming off the stator to a safe level. Testing a regulator rectifier with a multimeter is tedious, and frankly, you can only actually evaluate the diodes responsible for rectification. There's nothing you can do to test the circuitry involved in the regulator function. So if we already know that the stator is doing its job properly, then the best way to test if this is functioning properly is to measure the voltage at the battery with the bike running. With the stator wiring plugged back into the bike's harness, go ahead and access the battery, switch your multimeter to volts DC, connect the probes to the terminals, and then start the bike and rev it up to about 4,000 to 5,000 RPM. You should see between 13.5 and 15 volts on your multimeter. If you see less than 13.5 or more than 15, as a last ditch effort, go through the wiring connecting the stator to the regulator rectifier, look at it all, make sure it's intact, check out the plugs, make sure they're not loose or damaged or corroded. And if all of that checks out, then you have effectively narrowed the problem down to your regulator rectifier. Why do these parts fail in the first place? Most of the time it's due to being overloaded. The stator is designed to match the electrical requirements of the motorcycle. So if you're nursing along a dead battery or you've plugged in a bunch of power-hungry accessories, it's going to put more stress on this thing. Same thing goes for the regulator rectifier, although a loose ground can also kill this, since shunting to ground is how the regulator does its job. So if you keep your battery fresh and you resist the urge to plug in a bunch of heated gear and fog lights, your charging system should keep working for a good long time. And if it starts acting up, now you know how to pinpoint the problem. Thanks for watching another episode of the Shop Manual. We make this show for you so that you can be better informed and educated when it comes to living with and working on your motorcycle. And in an effort to get to know you better and the content you want to see, we have created a very brief survey. There's a link down in the description, and if you answer those questions, it will help us understand what you would like to see from future episodes. Also, keep in mind that this show is produced using funds when folks like you make a purchase from RevZilla. So if you buy your tires or your chain or your apparel through RevZilla, you will be supporting the show. Thanks.